I know you've written a book on Sonny Liston. So I'll include a link for that as well on the video description. So anyone interested can buy that book and have a read through it. So I want to start from the beginning. I know you're the expert on Sonny Liston. So the question which a lot of people always ask is, when was Sonny Liston born? What's the rumors? What's the truth? What do you think?
I've got about 3 pages of information on his age in my biography, and it seems almost certain that Sonny was born prior to 1920. He fought, or was scheduled to fight, in 1934 under the name of Charles Sailor Liston. There was an article in the East St. Louis Journal, which is referenced in the Encyclopedia Britannica, of all places. And it was also written about prior to the Patterson fight in the New York Times. But it's pretty much, nobody talks about that anymore. But there was a picture in the East St. Louis Journal of a very young Charles Liston, purportedly 17 years old in 1934, and he wore a pea coat and a Navy cap, hence the name Charles, the nickname Sailor Liston. There was another Sailor Liston, I believe a middleweight, that fought in California, who died a couple of years after. And some people tell me, well, there was no Sailor Liston. I saw the photo. I don't know what I did with the article. It was in an article by Wells Twombly, a very good writer who wrote for a Houston paper, and he also wrote for the San Francisco Examiner. I don't know if Sonny was 17. He might have been younger, because he was a very big kid. He was big at birth. And so if they said he was 17, he might have been 15 at the time, which would have put his age, his year of birth, as 1919. A lot of people point to the 1940 census, where there's a Charles L. Liston listed as 10 years old. Sonny most often gave the year of birth, his year of birth, as 1932, either July 8th or May 8th, 1932. At other times, he gave his year of birth as 1933. And there was one instance, I think, where his wife, Geraldine, said he was born in 1934. But in the 1950 census, there's a Charles Liston who's listed as being 27 years old. So I think the census data, which is what a lot of people point to refute what I say, is pretty unreliable. And one of the things that stood out the most to me is I was talking to a promoter whose name escapes me right at the minute, and he was involved in Sonny's fights late in his career. And he told me that when Sonny was in the gym, like in 68, 69, all of his gym mates would say to him, "Come on, Sonny, how old are you?" Because everyone knew he was older. And he used to get upset when people asked him about his age, but at that point in his career, there was no point in getting upset, and they just wanted to know. And one day he says, without any prompting, and to the surprise of everyone, "A lot older than you think." And Sonny, like most boxers, I think, are very, very honest. I think the only thing Sonny ever lied about in his life was when he entered the ring. He said he was born a lot later than he was, because you don't want to get into the ring. I mean, his pro career started in 1953. So for him to say, "Yeah, I'm 35 years old," would have put him at a psychological disadvantage. So like I said, there's a lot of information. I talked to Angelo Dundee's son, Jimmy, and he said, "Dad told me that Sonny was a lot older than he said he was. In fact, I think he said he was older than dirt." That's what Angelo said. And yeah, that doctors looked at Sonny. They said, "This guy is 45 if he's a year. If he's a year." And to me,
more than a full decade.
Yeah,
older than.
And the real significance of that is, to me, that he was at his very best in 1960 when it destroyed the heavyweight division. And so the man never had a prime, but he was at his best past the age of 40. He got into the ring with Ali, then Cassius Clay. He was in his mid-40s.
Wow.
This is ridiculous. So, I mean, but for him to be so good in 1960 and 59, 61, 62, 63, he only had 3 fights. They were all one-round knockouts. So he didn't really have a chance to show how great he was in those years because he waited 2.5 years for Floyd Patterson to give him a shot at the title, which is reprehensible.
So the reason he gave his age later was purely because of boxing reasons.
Yeah. He knew he was older. I mean, he had a stepsister. His father supposedly fathered 25 children. I think with Helen, his mother, it was 13 children, the last 13 children. And one of his stepsisters insisted that Sonny was born right around the time of the end of the Great War, which is World War I, which ended in 1918. Yeah, so that again supports, it's anecdotal, of course, but that again supports the notion that I say that Sonny was a very old man when he won the title, and he was a very old man when he lost it.
Very interesting. I mean, I expected a few years, but for, to be a full decade or more, that's a huge difference, isn't it?
My God, yeah.
Yeah. So how was Liston's childhood? We often hear about the stories and how he was nicknamed by the police, I believe, as a yellow shirt bandit. So how was his childhood? We know his father apparently was quite rough with him, and he left home. So what can you tell us about his childhood?
Well, there's not that much known, but his dad, Tobe, if that's how you pronounce his first name, was a real son of a bitch. He treated his kids badly. Supposedly, when the family mule died at the age, Sonny was at 9 years old, and Sonny was pulling a plow rather than the mule that was pulling the plow. That apparently is true. I don't know. But Sonny used to say, I got a beating every day. He once said, if I didn't get a beating, I said, what's the matter? But how come you didn't beat me today? And so Sonny said he ran away from home. He shucked some pecans off of a tree and got enough for a bus fare to St. Louis, which he claimed he did in 1945, which when he gave his year of birth is 1932, he was 13 years old. Well, that's the story he gave. But it was a terrible childhood. When he went to prison, he ate 3 square meals a day for the first time in his life. Supposedly, when somebody served him chicken, he didn't know what to do with it because he had never eaten chicken before. He had enough sustenance. He was a big kid, but yeah, his childhood. What's really remarkable is that his father was such a damn son of a bitch, and the way he treated him. A lot of men, maybe not most, how they're treated by their fathers is how they treat their kids. And Sonny was the exact opposite. I'm telling you, no fighter, I don't know, maybe no person, and I know this sounds like hyperbole, ever loved kids more than Sonny did. And it wasn't just black kids. He loved white kids just as much, if not more.
That's a side we don't often hear about Liston, is it?
No, it's not. Today, and the reason Sonny's reputation has gone to hell and his legacy has gone to hell is that about 75% of the people in your country and in America were born in 1965 or later. And so what most people know about Sonny Liston is the 2 Ali fights, in particular, the fight in Lewiston, Maine, where, he's on the ground. And in fact, that photo has been immortalized. That photo makes millions of dollars each year for the people who own that photo. And it pisses me off to no end. When I see people wearing a t-shirt, Liston on the ground, I want to ridicule them. Because there is no way that fight was on the up and up. Of course, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into that. Ironically, I have that picture here, and I took it down. I thought, out of respect, I'm not going to put that because I usually have it in the bag. I'll take it down behind me. Well, it's my son, it's not mine, but I usually have it up in some of my videos because both, like I said, people after 65, I'm 78, always big fans of Ali. But we learn, I've learned more about boxing. We learn more about his opponents and other guys as well. So it's really interesting. So when did Liston take up boxing then?
Well, like I say, he fought or was prepared to fight in 1934. I don't think that fight ever came off because the only article I found was an article saying that he was about to fight in 1934, in early 1934. He fought his entire life. A friend of mine who's got an online presence, Ray Hawkins, I believe his uncle had videos, had fight films of street fights that Sonny engaged in, where he absolutely destroyed people. Okay. And so Sonny was fighting his whole life. He had anybody who was fool enough to take him on, was going to get the crap beat out of him. And so as the story goes, he took up boxing in prison when the athletic director there, who was a priest, said, Sonny, you ought to channel all that rage and learn how to fight. And Sonny really liked his father, Stephen, so he did. And what was remarkable, when they brought a pro in to test him, the guy was 4-2. The guy lasted 2 rounds. He says, get me out of here. He's going to kill me. His jab was so good early on that it supports the notion that, well, he was trained a little bit before that. So he had an amateur career after he got out of prison based on the recommendation of Father Stevens. And because there were some boxing people who were interested in training him and promoting his career, he had a brief amateur career where he won the St. Louis Golden Gloves, the National Golden Gloves, the International AAU title. And on his way to winning the National Golden Gloves, he fought Ed Sanders, who just a few months earlier had won the Olympic gold medal in the heavyweight division. And he was highly touted. And Sonny beat him soundly in 3 rounds. So, he never went to the Olympics. It's clear if Sonny had, he could have been heavyweight champion of the Olympics and gotten that medal, but that was not in the cards for him. So, I guess he was an amateur for about 6 or 9 months, and then he finally turned pro later on in 1903.
It's a very short amateur career then.
Right.
And you think that was also related to his age? He knew he was a little bit older in age. He just wanted to get a few fights and get on with it.
Right. Plus his friend Barney Baker, who was a Teamster organizer, like a right-hand man to Jimmy Hoffa, he said, look, if you're going to fight, you might as well get paid for it. Because as amateurs, they would give them like a watch or something if they won something, if they won a tournament. And Barney thought that Sonny was at least, was pushing for, was probably close to 30 at least when he hooked up with him in 1953. And that's part of the anecdotal information about Sonny's age. And there's a lot of it. And I put it all down. People can draw their own conclusions. But he did fight, or was scheduled to fight, in 1934. Unfortunately, I don't have the photo. Somewhere in the files of the San Francisco Examiner, I had the article at one point, and I lost it, and there was a photo of him. And it was a spitting image of Sonny Liston. And I mean, it was as though it was the same photo as when he looked the same as when he was arrested in 1949, and as if they were twins born 15 years apart. That's how much it looked like Sonny.
That's really interesting. So he went pro. So he's supposed to have fought in 1934, but he actually went pro more than a decade later.
2 decades later, 1953. Yeah.
Wow. So when he did eventually turn pro, how did that happen? And is it true that the underworld sort of figures were involved in his management at that time as well when he did go pro?
From the start. John Vitale had a piece of Sonny's contract early on. He was the #2 mafia chieftain, I think. He was also an FBI informant, but back in 1953. And he treated Sonny well. He got him a job and got him an apartment. And Sonny liked Vitale, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. And they moved him fairly quickly. In his, I believe, his 7th pro fight, he fought a rated contender, Johnny Summerlin, in Summerlin's hometown of Detroit. And he beat him rather soundly. And they fought a rematch a couple of months later, and he beat him again. And this was in 1955. But unfortunately, the next year, Sonny got arrested for assaulting a police officer, and that stopped his career. It was I think, like in March of 1956, and he didn't fight again for about 20 months after that. He didn't fight at all in 1957. He fought in early 1958, and that's when they moved him to Philadelphia. There was Bernie Glickman was a businessman. He had businesses in both St. Louis and Chicago, and he had a substantial piece of Sonny's contract. But there was a dispute. The Eastern mob wanted Sonny's contract. And so they had a meeting of the two mobs. Giancana sent a real brutal guy with Sonny back to Philadelphia, I think, or to New York, which is where the meeting took place. And the commission decided, no, he's coming back east. And he's going to belong to Palermo, Blinky Palermo and Frankie Carbo. And they paid Bernie Glickman. He said, I got 40 grand invested in this kid. So they paid him his 40 grand. His son, Joel Glickman, said he didn't want the money. He knew he had a heavyweight champ, as did everyone, which is why they knew, the mob knew, when he was beating up everyone in the prison system, in the Missouri State prison system, they had their eye on him even then. And they had their eye on him back east. And so, yeah, when he got out of jail, which was probably because of this Teamsters connection, that he got out early. He only served 9 months, supposedly, for assaulting a police officer. Really?
Okay.
So it was this guy, he called Geraldine, the N-word. He called Sonny the N-word. And Sonny said, I went berserk. I wanted to kill the guy. And the guy broke his leg. And when he got out of jail, the assistant chief of police says, if you don't leave town, they're going to find you in an alley someday. So he left town. He moved to Chicago. Glickman moved him to Chicago, where he trained at this Madison Hotel. It must have been like being in a resort for Sonny. And there was a gym on the first floor. It was on the southwest side of Chicago. And he was there for a couple of months until the commission ruled that, no, he belongs to the East Coast, not to the Midwest.
It's adding up, though, the way you've spoken about it and told the story. It makes sense that he actually probably was born, as you say, in the 1920s or even before, because everything seems to have been pushed along quickly. The reason must be because of his age. They don't want to, because guys in that time were fighting every week almost, or every month. So if Liston was already fighting rated contenders within 10 fights, there must have been a reason to it, and most likely it's not just because of his skill, it would have been his age as well. They want to move him along quickly rather than giving him 30, 40 fights like many of the others were at that time before they got a title shot, or 50 fights. That's it's very, very interesting. So this is, so you mentioned he moved to Philadelphia. So was this sort of time he sort of paired up with Willie Reddish Sr. as his coach?
Yeah. I had the pleasure and the honor of interviewing and becoming friends with Willie's son, Bill Reddish, who was a good friend of Sonny's. And he told me Palermo walked Sonny into his gym at the Police Athletic League because he had been a fighter and he was training a lot of good fighters. And he said, he's yours now. And Bill told me, my father said, oh, I got him now. I got him because he always wanted to train the heavyweight champion. And Reddish, you know, he really trained Sonny to enhance his jab. The problem was he really trained Sonny like he would train a young fighter instead of the old fighter that he was. And you've probably seen a lot of video where Willie Reddish would wind up like a baseball pitcher and throw this 14 or 16-pound medicine ball at Sonny's midsection at a distance of maybe 2 feet. And Sonny would just bounce off his stomach. He would say, you know, do it again. Come on, boss, do it again. You know, it didn't serve him that well because not that, you know, you couldn't hurt his body. And especially later on in his career, they were doing it. When he was training for the Clay fight. It was Cassius Clay at that time. And I mean, Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali never threw a body punch in his life. You know, what are you doing? You're training him like he's a young guy. I mean, he's not going to get hit in the stomach anyway. You know, you have to be a really good puncher to knock somebody down with a body punch. You got to be like a Sonny Liston, an Ernie Shavers, a Cleveland Williams, a George Foreman, not a Floyd Patterson or a Muhammad Ali or Joe Frazier. No, you're not going to knock a guy like Sonny Liston down with a body punch.
You mentioned Cleveland Williams there. The Liston fights of Cleveland Williams, they become almost legendary, but there's not much footage available of those fights. Is there anything you know about those fights of Cleveland Williams?
Oh, well, fortunately, there is film of those two bouts. And unfortunately, I think Sonny's, and I'll get back to that, but I think Sonny's best fight was later on in 1960 after the second Williams fight when he fought Zora Foley in Denver. And Zora Foley had the best round anybody had against Sonny from the write-ups that I read. But there's no film of the fight. It ended at 28 seconds into the third round. At the time, Sonny was the number 1 contender. Foley was the number 2 contender. Yeah, when he fought Cleveland Williams, and I would recommend to anyone who wants to understand how much of a fighting machine Sonny Liston was and how hard he was to hurt, to watch those two fights. My favorite round is the second round of the second fight when Cleveland Williams opens up on Liston and he lands 7, 8, 9 punches to the head and they look like they're all getting through. And Sonny doesn't move. His knees don't buckle. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, he must be thinking to himself, I can't let this go on much longer. And he didn't. That's what he was actually thinking. He says, I got to take it to this guy. And he did. And a minute later, Cleveland Williams is out. He knocked Cleveland Williams out twice. Cleveland Williams could hit very, very hard. Sonny said he punched hard, punches fast. If the Cleveland Williams of 1959 had fought the Muhammad Ali of 1966, and when Cleveland Williams fought him after being shot in the stomach, almost losing his life, losing a kidney, having a bullet next to his spine that was too dangerous to remove, it would have been a hell of a fight. I'm not saying Cleveland Williams could have beaten Muhammad Ali at that time, but he might have because he could hit. He was a big man. He was the same size as Ali, and he could hit real, real hard. I mean, there's a tragic figure if you ever saw one.
Yeah, I've heard the story of Cleveland Williams, and I think there's even a story that Ali knew that Williams was way past his best because of the shooting, and he was advised by certain people in his camp to take Williams out as quick as he could because it would look bad otherwise. That, you know, if the fight did last longer, because everyone knew Cleveland wasn't the same boxer anymore after the shooting incident. But as you said before, that he was recognized as one of the hardest and biggest punchers in history at that time.
To Ali's credit, he fought Williams, which was the best payday of his career. To his credit, he fought Zora Foley a year later, which is the best payday of his career. Those guys were in their prime in 59 and 1960 when Sonny beat the crap out of them. I mean, there was a 3-round fight with Williams, then a 2-round fight, and a 3-round fight with Foley. And then a 1-round fight with Patterson and a 1-round fight with Patterson. Those 5 fights, I think, had a total of 24 minutes of action. So, Ali fought those guys 7 years past their prime. And they were past their prime. What could he do? But Sonny had destroyed the heavyweight division. So when Ali beat him in '64, and he inherited the division that was boxing's equivalent of post-war Dresden in Germany,
Yeah.
it had been decimated. Because there were some very good fighters, all of whom were black at the time. You know, and the only fighters he didn't fight were guys like Ingemar Johansson and Henry Cooper and Brian London, who wanted no part of Sonny. Those are good, solid fighters, but
yeah,
it would have been a series if he had fought Cooper, Johansson, Brian London, anyone. He would have had a string of one-round fights. But he would have been better off doing that because he would have stayed sharp.
But it's the Ali effect again, because Ali became such a huge figure, not just in boxing. Ali became bigger than boxing. That again, people who don't look deep into Ali's opponents, they have a certain picture of Liston, and the same way, because of Cleveland Williams, people don't know how good a boxer he was. They only see Ali putting on his career best performance, probably in 3 rounds against Cleveland Williams, or Ali looked amazing. But again, they realize how good Williams was. So it's interesting. Liston beat those guys when they were at their peak, but Ali beat them when Ali was in his own peak. So it's an interesting contrast. So are they the best performances that Liston had? Do you believe?
Oh yeah, I mean the Patterson fights were great. The thing about Floyd Patterson, a lot of people think based on those 2 fights is, he had a glass jaw, he was a pushover. After Patterson fought Sonny, he was competitive with everyone. He beat a lot of good fighters. He fought Jerry Quarry, who was an excellent fighter, a couple of times. There were 2 close fights. One ended in a draw, and one was a split decision. I'm not sure, I can't recall. Quarry may have knocked Floyd Patterson down once. Patterson was competitive against Muhammad Ali.
He fought him twice, and the back injury was what got him in those fights, wasn't it? He wasn't getting knocked out by him, really.
Yeah, I think he was knocked down once by Ali. So yeah, you could knock him down. I mean, you could knock Joe Lewis down fairly easily too, but Floyd Patterson was a hell of a fighter. He was just little. And it's like Sonny told the ringside physician who came in to take his vital signs in Comiskey Park on September 25th, 1962. The guy was a betting man. I talked to his son. And so he said to Sonny, because he wanted to lay a bet. He says, so Sonny, what do you think about the fight? And he looks at him, he says, Doc, no 185-pound motherfucker can beat me. And these are the truest words that were ever spoken. But it also shows a degree of humility, because Sonny he's not saying nobody could beat me. He knew, like any fighter, that somebody on his best day might have beaten him. Yeah. But the way I look at it is, if Sonny was at his best, he beats everyone. Everyone.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we didn't get to see him in his physical peak if he started so late. So the title delay, there are criticisms coming from ex-fighters, ex-champions. People were trying to talk Floyd Patterson out of fighting, or giving Liston a chance to go for win the title. So what was the general sort of feeling around that time? Was the camp sort of mood, or was it feeling that he was ever going to get a shot? Incidentally, Ali was one of the few people who picked Liston to knock Patterson out within a few rounds, wasn't he? But what was the story behind the delay in getting that title shot? Was it because of his the mob background, so to speak?
Well, that was used as an excuse. Sonny had no control over his management, to his detriment. They robbed him blind. The mob had control of the upper echelons of boxing. They controlled the fighters because they controlled the managers. The managers could not get a big fight unless Ernie Carbo, Frankie Palermo, Blinky Palermo okayed it. In doing so, they got a piece of the contract of the fighter through the manager. They got some of the manager's share. So that, and the fact that he was an ex-con, which a lot of fighters had done time, was used as an excuse particularly by Customato, to avoid fighting not only Sonny, but those are the excuses he used to avoid fighting Sonny, who was the #1 contender for 2.5 years. For 30 months, he was the #1 contender before he stepped into the ring with Patterson in September of 1962. He also avoided Cleveland Williams, Sora Foley, Eddie Machen. And Eddie Machen, despite his 1-round knockout by Ingemar Johansson, was a hell of a boxer. And all three of those guys, chances are, could have beaten Patterson. I blame Customato for freezing out all of those guys. But Customato knew Patterson was a small heavyweight. You know, he fought most of his career at like 185 pounds. He knew he couldn't beat Liston, and he used as an excuse anything that he could. Sonny, unfortunately, he did some stupid things. He got arrested twice in 1961 in Philadelphia. First time, he's standing on a corner talking to a fan who's asking about, you think you'll ever get a Patterson fight, whatever. Cops come along and say, hey, move along. He said, what is this? I'm talking boxing here. He says, you want to get your ass busted? You know, you stay right where you are. I said, what is this? What is this, Russia or something? I can't talk to somebody. I might as well be in Alabama. But they arrested him. They took him down to the station. And magistrate came in and said, you arrested him for this? They arrested him for corner lounging. And said, you can go, Sonny. So he said, well, the red car brought me here. The red car should take me back. And that's when they arrested him. He got suspended at that point. And then a couple of months later, he's driving with a friend of his, and they're following a woman who his friend said he thought was a prostitute. And supposedly Sonny shines the spotlight on his car, on her car, and a park guard comes up and arrests the two of them. So D'Amato, and Sonny got off on that. So Sonny went to Denver to rehabilitate himself. And the priest there said he wasn't rehabilitating, he was just trying to reorient him. So if Sonny had a good manager, he would have fought Patterson a lot sooner. And I'll tell you why. Carbo and Palermo were convicted of federal crimes in late 1960, and they both went to federal prison for very long stretches by early 1961. So Sonny's contract at that point was his own. And in early May of 1961, at his row home in Philadelphia, for 3 days, he had people interested in managing him or promoting him come to the house and try and convince him that he should go with them. And I was 13 at the time, so I couldn't have been there. But he ended up signing with a guy by the name of George Katz, who was a picture framer by profession. He managed, he steered one fighter, a welterweight, to a title shot, and he was very noisy. And Sonny liked the way he spoke up for people, for his fighters, but he did nothing for Sonny. And you know, if I had been at Sonny's house, let's say I'm my age now, and I had been my age in 1961, because everyone wanted a piece of Sonny. Sugar Ray Robinson was there, Rocky Marciano, everyone wanted a piece of him. I would have said to Sonny, look, Charles, I'll tell you what, I would like to manage you, and I will guarantee you, I will get you a fight with Floyd Patterson by the end of the year. We don't have to sign a contract. We can do it on a handshake. You don't have to tell me what you're going to pay me. I know you're the best fighter in the world. You are going to be champ, and I will never betray you. The thing is, Sonny, you have to stay out of trouble. And what happened right after he signed with George Katz, he got into trouble. And that delayed and delayed. In late 1961, after Patterson had fought Johansson a third time, and that third fight was a crime. Johansson should not have been entitled to that fight, but that was Customano. There was a closed circuit doubleheader. Sonny was in Philadelphia fighting the German heavyweight champ Albert Westphal, and Patterson was in Toronto fighting a guy who's Tom McNeely, who somehow made it into the top 10 rating. He wasn't anywhere near a great fighter, some of the great fighters out there. And what's really disturbing is that Tom McNeely got paid $125,000 to fight Floyd Patterson. He was knocked down something like 12 times in the fight. It was a 4-round fight. Patterson was actually helping him up some of the time. I mean, this is ridiculous. And Sonny got paid $75,000 to fight Albert Westphal, who he knocked out with one punch in the first round. At that point, when Patterson went to the White House, JFK, who did not like Sonny, and his brother Bobby did not like Sonny because of his mob connections. So JFK says, it would have been a better fight if it would have been a much better fight if you had fought Liston and Westphal had fought McNeely. And so that he was backed into a corner, so he had to fight him. He waited another 10 stinking months before he got in the ring with Sonny. Wow. And he he offered Sonny 10% of the gain when every other opponent of his got the standard 20%. And he said, look, he'll fight me. And Sonny said, I'll fight him for nothing. And so I said, you can put up or shut up. And he said, he'd fight me for nothing. He eventually got 12.5%. The percentages, and this is striking, Patterson got 45% of the live gate and 55% of the ancillaries, the closed circuit TV. Sonny got 12.5% of both. Floyd Patterson made $1.18 million, I think, on that fight. Sonny made $282,000. Wow. Floyd Patterson was a really good fighter. I was just watching his fight with Archie Moore, which was a good fight. It was really even until the 5th round. But he was a good fighter. He was a small guy. He would have been one of the best 185-pound fighters of all time, I think.
Yeah.
And he was competitive at 195 against the entire division in the late 60s and early 70s. But he was no match for a guy like Sonny Liston, and he knew it.
Yeah. A couple of things sort of come to mind. First of all, do you think Cuss with Mike Tyson, there seem to be quite a few parallels between Mike Tyson and Sonny Liston. Do you think Cuss wanted his own Sonny Liston when he saw Mike Tyson? They seem quite similar to what you've said so far, some of the things that have gone on. What do you think?
Well, I think he saw, this guy has got the potential to be a truly great fighter, even though he was small. His 71-inch reach. Mike Tyson was a phenomenal boxer.
Do you think Cuss saw Sonny Liston in Mike Tyson?
I don't know. Probably, because people were saying, "Oh, this guy's the greatest. He's going to be the greatest heavyweight of all time." He was very, very good.
Even the persona, the intimidation, like Mike Tyson, they call him the baddest man in the planet, most intimidating fighter of all time. But now I hear a lot of people, a lot on my Instagram, say, no, it wasn't Mike Tyson. It was Sonny Liston. He's the most intimidating boxer of all time. So even then as well, Cuss made that sort of fighter, of modeled his intimidation on Liston as well.
Yeah, and Mike Tyson has as much respect for Sonny Liston as anyone. And he modeled himself after Sonny Liston. I remember, I think it was right after he won the title, I am Jack Dempsey. I am Sonny Liston. I'm the greatest ever. Well, he was really good at that time, but he knew that he would have been no match for Sonny Liston. He told people that. And in fact, you can see him on some short videos. Nice. The guy was a monster. He was unbelievable. And the thing about Sonny in terms of his fighting style, Sonny didn't go out like Tyson, boom, boom, boom. No, Sonny didn't like being hit. He had been hit his entire life. So he was a very composed fighter. He always fought his fight. When he saw the opportunity, if it happened in the first round, boom, he would take it. If it didn't happen, he wouldn't push the issue. Unfortunately, he did that only against two fighters. He didn't fight his fight against two guys, Eddie Major and Cassius Clay.
You mentioned his jab earlier as well. Even now as well, you don't commonly hear Liston's jab being amongst the greatest, but now recent times people are saying no, Liston had actually one of the best jabs of all time. But I'm hearing that more, being ranked up there with Ali, Holmes, Thomas Hearns, those guys who are the best jabs. You're hearing Liston's name coming up more and more often now as one of the greatest jabs of all time.
He had the best jab. He had the most powerful jab. He controlled his fights with. He had 84-inch reach. At the end of that 84-inch reach was a 15.5-inch fist, which to get his hands into an 8-ounce glove was really a chore.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had to have gloves specially made in order to get his hands. I saw Sonny Liston once training in the late 60s in Los Angeles. And the image that sticks in my mind is, I think it was Dick Sadler is trying to get Sonny's fist into his glove. And he's using like the ring ropes or a stool on one knee to get leverage to pull Sonny's glove up onto his fist. And Sonny is pushing his fist in as hard as he can. This is a 16-ounce glove.
Wow.
Joe Louis had the best jab up until Sonny Liston. Everybody said, a lot of people think that Joe Louis still has the best jab. When Joe was asked how he would have fought Sonny Liston, he said, quite honestly and quickly, said, well, I wouldn't have jabbed with him. I see a lot of people say, oh, Larry Holmes had the best jab. Larry Holmes would not have jabbed with Sonny Liston. You couldn't win a fight by letting Sonny Liston hit you. Ali knew that. In preparation for the rematch, he said, I can't let him hit me, which is what boxing is all about. You don't want to get hit, especially in the head. Yeah. And he could hook off the jab.
Yes.
Which not a lot of people could do. Joe Louis couldn't hook off the jab. Archie Moore could. And Ali could. Ali had a great jab. It was so fast and it would cut somebody to shreds. But the problem, unfortunately, Sonny didn't take advantage of his jab when he fought Clay the first time. He didn't fight his.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that very, very soon. Secondly, you mentioned Liston talking about no 185-pounder is gonna beat me. Now, Rocky Marciano was the heavyweight champion just prior to Liston sort of making a name for himself, and Marciano was around that weight, 185 pounds. And there are some people will say Marciano he retired because he was still great at the time he retired. He was undefeated. He beat Archie Moore his last fight, and he was still a great boxer. Do you think Marciano had one eye on Sonny Liston when he retired?
No,
no truth, no sort of rumors.
Yeah, I think it was in 1956. I read an article in a European publication. And the boxing community had taken note of Sonny. Archie Moore told the author, there's a fighter in St. Louis blowing like a hurricane. That was his quote. So, but Marciano retired for a couple of reasons. He couldn't take the training. He told Ash Resnick, he says, it's not the fight, Ash, it's the training. I can't take the training. He trained like a maniac. He had to. He had to be in the best shape. He never stopped throwing punches. He had those short punches. So plus the fact that his manager took 50% of everything that he made in and out of the ring. And he hated Al Weil. So no, don't tell anybody who says that, and I know I hear that a lot, or I read it a lot, that he retired so he wouldn't have to face Sonny Liston is not true. He wouldn't have wanted to face Sonny Liston, no. I mean, Rocky Marciano, really good 185-pound fighter, but he had a 67-inch reach, not 68, it was 67. And I don't want to piss anybody off because, the people that love a fighter love him to death. But Sonny could have put his left hand, his left fist on Marciano's head, and Marciano would not have been able to touch Sonny with a punch.
Yeah, 17-inch reach difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and a 25, 30-pound weight advantage. I mean, size matters. Size matters. And Sonny, he was only 6 feet, 1/2 inch. His best fighting weight was 209 to 212, but he had that big fist and an 84-inch reach. And I don't think, I would maintain that Sonny would not have been at a size disadvantage against any fighter. Tyson Fury, anybody, George Foreman, anyone, because of the jab. Because you were going to eat a lot of jabs, and they hurt. Sonny Liston knocked people down with a jab.
Yeah, and I've spoken about this on my Instagram. The hardest punchers in history, Liston, Tyson, Foreman, Shavers, Lewis, they've all been around about the same weight, 200 to 220 pounds, 210 pounds. So Liston, he would not have been, as you said, size disadvantage to today's heavyweights. We'll also get onto that as well. But first of all, I'm going to let you take the lead again and discuss those fights with Cassius Clay first and Muhammad Ali in the second. The controversy around them. What's the story behind it for you?
Well, let me first say, the first fight I don't believe was fixed. I can go into that. The second fight definitely was. You have to keep in mind that from March 9th, 1961 until February 24th, 1964, one day before that first fight, which is almost 3 years, the sum of Sonny's ring time was 6 minutes and 14 seconds. He knocked out Albert Westphal in December of 1961 in 1 minute and 58 seconds. September of 62, he knocked out Patterson in 2 minutes and 6 seconds. July 22nd, 1963, Patterson in 2 minutes and 10 seconds. He was basically had a 3-year layoff. They talk about Ali's layoff, which hurt him badly when he couldn't fight from 67 to late 1970, very unfair. So if Sonny had fought Clay on September 30th, which is when he and his handlers wanted him to fight, we probably you wouldn't be talking to me now, because Sonny Liston would be the person that people talked about in the same way they talk about Muhammad Ali now. But Clay's handlers, his syndicate, which was 11 people in the Louisville sponsoring group, 10 of the 11 people were millionaires, and they knew money, and they were taking really good care of Cassius. And they said, well, no, we're not going to fight him until next year, because there's a thing called income averaging, and that just come into the tax code, and it would be beneficial to us and to Cassius if we fought in 1964. Unfortunately, Sonny didn't stay busy. He goes to Great Britain and Europe to fight a series of exhibitions. So he's not staying busy. They loved him in Great Britain. They loved him in Sweden. They loved him everywhere. And the tour was cut short when the 4 little girls were killed in a church bombing in Birmingham. And Sonny was so shook up by that he left Great Britain. He violated his contract. He got sued for $75,000, which I assume he paid or he settled. And all he wanted to do, Cassius Clay had built himself up verbally so that, well, it figured to be a big money fight. And if they had staged it in Philadelphia in September, it would have been, they could have had at the stadium in Philadelphia, I mean, I think it held 80 or 100,000 people. It could have been filled. Sonny, the hometown hero. It could have been a $6 or $7 million gate. California wanted to fight, but the promoters, but the boxing commission there didn't want him to fight any more than New York wanted him to fight. So in the course of training, Sonny injures his left arm and his shoulder. And he tries to get the fight postponed. But the Miami Beach Athletic Commission says, no way you're going to postpone this fight. Miami Beach Athletic Commission was mad at Sonny because the Patterson rematch was supposed to be staged in Miami Beach, I think in April of '63. Sonny had a bad knee. Commission doctors found unmistakable cartilage damage. And they said he shouldn't, he should go get that checked out. And so the fight got moved because after April, all the tourists to come down there for the winters leave Miami Beach. Okay, so the fight is the Clay fight. Nobody wants that fight. And so a guy in Bill McDonald takes says, I'll promote the fight, guarantees $650,000, which is not a lot, even by those standards back then. Sonny was injured, but he thought so poorly of Cassius Clay, as did a lot of people, that he figured he could get away with it. Now, if you think back, Clay had a couple of fights in '63. Doug Jones took him the limit, and Clay clearly won the fight, I thought, as did Sonny. The referee had it 8-1-1, but if Clay hadn't won the 9th and 10th rounds, he would have lost the fight, which would have destroyed his marketability. Then he goes to England, and he fights Henry Cooper. And he's toying with Henry Cooper, although Henry Cooper looked pretty good. But Clay he says, I'll go in 5. So he's carrying it to the 5th round. And he gets knocked out. I mean, this does not look like a world beater. And he was lucky he was knocked down late in the 4th round, and he fell into the ropes. It was a good punch. He got hit pretty hard. So Sonny goes into the fight with an injured left shoulder, unmistakably. And the doctors after the fight confirmed that all 8 doctors that were on behalf of the Miami Beach Athletic Commission confirmed that he had serious damage to his left arm. And they said, I don't know how you even tried to fight with that injury. Plus, Sonny trained for a 3-round fight because he didn't think Clay could fight. Nobody did. Nobody in his camp. And sports writers didn't think so either. Anytime sports writers were in his gym, he wouldn't be a serious trainer. And so they go, this guy can't fight. Oh my God, people worried for his life. I mean, every past heavyweight champion, said this fight shouldn't be made. As soon as the sports writers and sportscasters left the gym, he would train hard. So the guy who showed up on February 25th was not the guy Sonny was expecting. Perhaps the biggest difference in that fight, Sonny used to say, I fight my fight. I always fight my fight. Doesn't matter who the opponent is, what the crowd is saying, who they want to win. I fight my fight. I always fight my fight, which is what Ali always did, which is what anybody does. That's your strength. Sonny was so pissed off at Cassius Clay for the humiliation that he treated him with. He was calling him all kinds of names, and it really got to Sonny. So what does Sonny do? He chases Cassius Clay all around the ring. He doesn't fight his fight. Clay had a 78-inch reach, Liston an 84-inch reach. If Clay's going to hit Sonny, he has to be in range to be hit. Sonny didn't fight his fight. He knew he didn't. And he didn't train. The fight is even after 6 rounds. He can barely lift his left arm. Sonny did not quit. His manager called the fight. He says he broke his shoulder, can't fight. So everybody thinks Sonny Liston was a quitter. Okay. What most people don't know, Fayz, is that the original rematch was scheduled for November 16th, a Monday, 1964 in Boston. And Sonny had a physical trainer who really healed Sonny's shoulder. It was in good shape. He said Sonny could go 30 rounds. Sonny was training really, really hard. The great Archie Moore saw Sonny train a few weeks before the fight. He says, if he's in that kind of condition, I don't see the fight going more than 5 rounds. Archie knew all about Cassius Clay. He trained him briefly. He fought him. He knew as much about boxing as anyone. Ali's entire camp was worried. Now, most people don't know is Ali knew he had a hernia condition. He had a weakness. And he had scheduled surgery after the fight. So Sonny goes for a walk after dinner with his wife, Geraldine, on Friday, November 13th, Friday the 13th. He comes back from his walk. He always took a long walk after dinner. And he's greeted by Willie Reddish and Harold Conrad, the fight's publicist. And they said, a fight's off. Ali had a hernia. He had trained so hard. He would run in the mountains. He was chopping down trees. He would put bricks in a backpack. He wanted that title more than anything else. And he might very well have ended Ali's career or killed him because he didn't like Ali. He knew the reason he lost because he didn't take him seriously. He gave away his title. He was lonely, he said, without his title. It wasn't just the money. He really wanted that. And that would have been probably the greatest fight of all time. And again, if that fight had taken place, there's a chance Ali could have won. Yeah. But he wouldn't have been the same fighter afterwards. So again, if that fight had taken place, we wouldn't be talking right now because I wouldn't be the only person who wrote the definitive biography of the man. There have been a few other books, but nobody did any original research. Nobody really gave a damn about Sonny Liston. I mean, and there's some decent books about him out there, but they don't respect who he was as an individual. And so Sonny, you know, the fight takes place 6 months later. And Ali, he said, he was told nobody can get back in shape. He says, he's that old of a fighter. I don't see, he was in great shape for the last fight. Can he do it this time? I don't think so. Ferdy Pacheco says, you can't train an old fighter like they're training him. If you overtrain him, you know, he's dead. So if nothing had taken place outside of the ring for that fight, Sonny might have won. But Ali was in his prime. He was 23 years old at the time, which is when a boxer enters his prime. He may not have been in his prime on February 25th, 1964. On May 25th, 1965, he was in his prime. Sonny probably overtrained, but that wasn't the reason that he lost. So like I said, the reasons that Sonny lost the first fight were, one, he was twice as old as Ali. And he had an injured left shoulder. He didn't train and he fought angry. And still the fight was even after 6 rounds. But Sonny was spent. He didn't quit. His manager stopped the fight. So 3 days before the fight in Lewiston, a couple of Black Muslims, as they were called then, Nation of Islam members, come to Sonny's training quarters, put a gun to his head and said, look, you got to lose this fight or this is what's going to happen to you. Sonny was pretty shook up by that, but Sonny would not throw a fight, you know, because somebody told him to throw a fight. He wanted that title back. So I guess, well, the Muslims were still worried that Ali might not win. Keep in mind, Sonny Liston was a big favorite for the first fight. He was favored in the original rematch, and he was still favored in Lewiston because the odds makers knew what a great fighter that he was. So the morning of the fight, Sonny leaves his training headquarters, and shortly after that, Geraldine, Sonny's wife, who's there with an adopted kid of theirs, gets a knock on her door, and several Nation of Islam members say, we're going to keep you company for the rest of the day, Geraldine. So they were holding her hostage and the boy. Around noon or so before the weigh-in, Sonny gets word that he has to lose the fight. Now, I know this because I spoke with Ash Resnick. He didn't tell me this, but I spoke with his wife, Marilyn Resnick, many years ago. She passed away about a year or so ago, a wonderful woman. And I didn't even prompt her on this. She said, "Oh, that's Sonny. Yeah, I couldn't get in touch with Geraldine on the morning of the fight. And I was worried she wouldn't pick up her phone, and it was not like her because they were really good friends. The Resnicks were great friends with the Lewises and with the Listons. And she runs into Martha Malone Lewis, Joe's wife, right around noon and said, "Martha, I'm worried. Geraldine's not picking up her phone." She said, "Don't you know what happened? The black Muslims have her and the boy, and Sonny has to lose if he wants to see them alive again." I have a second source on that also. A friend of mine, David DiCarlo, who lives in Ohio, he would go to a lot of the International Boxing Hall of Fame weekends. And he would always talk to Emil Griffith, who was good friends with Sonny. You'll see some pictures with Sonny and Emil, both champions, both great champions. And Emil told David that Sonny told him that when he knew he had to lose the fight, he was going to make it the worst looking fix of all time, which he did. You know, if you look at that fight, you watch Sonny just before the knockdown. He takes a really long step and throws a lazy jab, not at Ali's face, at his chest. If you look at Ali, he's like really surprised. And he's moving back, but he's so fast, you know, boom. So he hits Sonny on the cheekbone. Sonny goes down. He goes down on all fours, as if he's giving a safety demonstration on how to fall without hurting yourself. Then he rolls on his back. I mean, people are booing. They're screaming fix already. What made it even worse is Jersey Joe Walcott, really good heavyweight champ, great fighter, didn't know what the hell he was doing as a referee. He's a celebrity referee. He can't get Ali to a corner. Why? Ali is so pissed off. He's screaming and listening, "Get up and fight, you yellow bum. Nobody will believe this." Back then, nobody did. Sonny's not getting him. He wants to be counted out, okay? Walcott doesn't even know. I guess he's not aware of the fact that, well, he's the only one who can do the count. What happens is, Ali's storming around the ring. And Sonny gets up. There's still no count. So remember, he gets on one knee, and all of a sudden, it's like he keels over, you know, like he's experiencing vertigo. You know, so Nat Fleischer is so incensed, the Ring magazine editor and publisher. He calls Walcott over. He says, "The fight is over. The bum is out. The bum's been counted out." There was never a count. Sonny finally has to get up because he's not hurt. Everybody can see he's not hurt. George Chuvalo said, "I looked in his eyes. He was not hurt." George Chuvalo was going to fight Sonny after that, win or lose. He's pissed off as hell. Sonny gets up. Ali rushes in. Sonny doesn't start fighting. He's trying to just shield himself. He's supposed to lose the fight. He wants to lose the fight. He throws away his entire career to save the life of his wife and child. Okay? The referees at ringside, Barney Felix, who refereed the first fight, he says, "I can't understand why Walcott found it beyond his requisite to not get Ali to a corner." He said, if Ali had done that and I was in the ring, he didn't listen to me, I would have disqualified it and given the fight to Liston, which would have been the worst thing that could have happened. The worst thing. So that's why Sonny lost that fight. He had to give it away. And he gave away everything, because now 57 years later, the world idolizes the photo of Muhammad Ali. It's a great photo. Look how big he is. Ali never looked like that in the ring, but he's screaming, "Get up and fight. No one will believe this." He walked back to his corner, Fayz. He said 3 words. He laid down. So there's a lot of people, knowledgeable boxing people who know a lot more about boxing than I do, who claim that Ali won that fight. And, you know, it's to maintain that Ali knocked Sonny Liston down or out with that 6-inch punch to the cheekbone, is tantamount to claiming that if Abraham Lincoln were alive today, he'd still be a Republican. Okay. In other words, it could not happen. And in Sonny's case, it did not happen. But yet, that photo is how people remember Sonny. Why? The photographer said it himself. Neil Leifer says, because that's how people want to remember Muhammad Ali. Okay, well, that's fine. Unfortunately, to remember Muhammad Ali that way, you have to remember Sonny Liston that way, as being a nobody who was knocked down, who was the aura that he had of being this great fighter. In 1 minute, Ali destroyed it. Yeah. And, you know, sentient people think that, you know, that was on the up and up. I love Barack Obama, great president, great guy. In his den, he has a photo. He has that photo, framed photo. And what it says is the headline, which was in some newspapers, first minute, first round. Millions of dollars each year are made off of that photo. So figuratively, at least, they're made off of Sonny Liston's back. And I will not have it anymore. You know, anybody thinks, I don't want to call people stupid. Watch the Cleveland Williams fights. Man alive, Sonny takes punches. His knees never buckle. But the 6-inch punch, did Muhammad Ali ever knock anybody out in the first round? One guy, a guy by the name of Slim Jim Robinson. Did he ever knock anybody down with one punch? No. Could he punch? Eddie Futch, I interviewed Eddie Futch. We were talking about that fight. He says, Ali wasn't a puncher. Please believe me. Please believe. It was a direct quote from the great Eddie Futch. Nobody back then, everybody knew Sonny took a dive. Nobody knew why. I was lucky. I happened to find out through no fault of my own. It was just handed to me by Marilyn Resnick. But like I said, everyone knew he took the dive. And now, you know, most of the world goes, oh no, look at that photo. Yeah, geez.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a Sonny Liston who was, you know, the police couldn't take him down in multiples or with batons. They hitting him on the head. And
exactly.
Yeah, for him, and like I just said, he took punches from Cleveland Williams. Ali was, I mean, every heavyweight can punch, but Ali was not one of the hardest punchers. And I just said, yeah, I don't remember any other time Ali knocked someone out in the first round. And the way you said he rolled over on his back, so something was amiss. But no one really knows no one sort of confirmed the exact reason. But I think everyone sort of now believes that fight was definitely something dodgy going on there. But it's just confirming the reason what it was. Then you've just given us that reason there. But it's amazing how history has been changed by these things, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I was a huge Ali fan. He's the reason I got interested in heavyweight boxing. When he won the light heavyweight medal in the Rome Olympics, I fell in love with the guy. I loved, you know, that's boxing, the way he danced. He was the best looking guy I'd ever seen. I followed his career religiously. In 1964, I was a junior in high school. Friends of mine told me I was the only kid in the junior class who picked Clay to beat Liston. Not because I knew anything about boxing. I loved him. I wanted him to win. I didn't know anything about Sonny Liston. I knew he had knocked out Floyd Patterson. And I was a huge Ali fan for the rest of the 60s until I would talk him up all the time until he fought Leon Spinks. And I go, what the hell? This guy's in his 8th professional fighters. And he's getting a title shot and he loses the fight. And I said, come on, Muhammad, it's time to hang it up. And it was around that time that I realized, because at that time, I had studied the heavyweight division, and I realized it was kind of an epiphany moment that there hadn't been a fighter before or since Sonny Liston that stood a reasonable chance of beating him other than Muhammad Ali. And I still think that way now. And I got to tell you, my opinion of Sonny Liston's talent and ability is based largely on the opinions of guys you might have heard of: Joe Louis, Archie Moore, Muhammad Ali, Floyd Patterson, Mike Tyson, George Foreman, a lot of people. you know, and the trainers, my God, Johnny Tocco, Emmanuel Stewart, Eddie Fudge. So, you know, I do have opinions, but if I give you an opinion, it's a highly informed opinion. But almost everything I have told you today is fact.
Mm. So where do you rank Sonny Liston amongst the heavyweight greats of all time? Where do you place him?
Well, I think that Ali and Liston are head and shoulders above everybody else. You're fighting for third place after that. I would maintain that Sonny Liston was the most talented heavyweight of all time because he had it all. I think he thought his best punch was his left hook. He had that pulverizing jab. He had a great right hand. Angelo Dundee said his right uppercut was as good as anyone's. Plus, he was a very good boxer. You know, he didn't take chances. He didn't want to get hit. Did he hit harder than George Foreman and Ernie Shavers? At that point, it doesn't matter because if any of those guys hit you, it's over. But George Foreman, loved the guy, interviewed him back in '87, just before his first return to the ring. George was not a boxer. He was a brute, you know, and he was strong he was a very, very strong man.
He also came from Liston's camp, didn't he? He was a sparring partner of Sonny Liston.
He owes a lot of the fighter he became to Sonny. Sonny taught him how to jab, and he makes
the art of intimidation as well.
Well, yeah, he tried to be like that, and you know, he'll say he was a real son of a bitch as a kid. You know, he was not a very good guy growing up. You know, he would get into fights and. But if you look at George, and, you know, when he tried to put that stare on, it wasn't real. You know, he was trying to appear to be the intimidating guy. But with Sonny Liston, I mean, guys would tell you, like Eddie Fudge, they said, no, that was for real. You look at Sonny, he was a bad man. Sonny had a mean streak. He had a dark side. But that was when he was in a fight. And he, you know, when he didn't know somebody and when he was disrespected. But if you treated Sonny well, God, he was a sweet guy. He would have done anything for you. I guarantee you, if you or anybody else who's watching this had met Sonny Liston, you would have liked him and you would have been proud to call him your friend. Because, yeah, it's not talked about. But there's a lot of photos online now of Sonny and kids, and you look at the photos of him, he loved kids. There was one fight he was introduced at, I just saw it recently. He brought a little white kid into the ring with him. It was just before the Clay fight, and he's holding him up. You know, he flew this kid to Chicago, and then he flew him back. His father said, go ahead. He was like 10 years old or 12 years old. He loved kids. There were Peter Keenan Sr., you've heard of him probably. He was, I think, a featherweight champion in the UK or in Europe. And when Sonny did his barnstorming tour of England and Europe, he became really good friends with Peter Keenan, and he loved Peter's son, Peter Jr., Pete. And Sonny invited him, Peter's son, to come to Denver to spend the Christmas holidays with him. He picks him up at the airport, and on the roof of Sonny's house is, welcome, Pete. Right after Christmas, Sonny sends a letter, or before Christmas, he and Geraldine send a letter to Peter Keenan Sr. and say, we would like to adopt your son. And he just loved kids. And so like a day later, Peter Keenan Sr. comes to Denver to take his son home. You know, but that's how much Sonny loved kids. And outside of the ring, when he was around people who treated him well, who didn't disrespect him, he was a wonderful man. I mean, it was like yin and yang. It was like, you know, the masks of comedy and drama. You know, the smile and the frown.
So do you have Ali and Liston 1 and 2, or is it a case of 1A, 1B, and you have Liston ranked ahead of Joe Louis as well?
Oh, yeah. Joe Louis said a couple of things. He said, Well, when he said, how would you fight Sonny? Well, I wouldn't have jabbed with him. He also said, I'm glad Sonny wasn't around when I was fighting. And he said Sonny was the strongest man he ever saw. Joe could be hurt. Joe was a great fighter, great technical fighter. I mean, yeah, he dominated. Didn't fight many great fighters at the time, but there was nobody around for him to fight. But he looked so much smaller than Sonny because his top weight really was around 201, 202. And I think he had a 76-inch reach. So Sonny has an 84-inch reach. And he's at 212. And anything that Joe Louis could do, Sonny did better. I wrote that Sonny Liston was Joe Louis squared. He had it all. And so can I say that Sonny Liston was better than Muhammad Ali? Well, no, I can't, because he lost the 2 fights. He did not win either of those 2 fights. I can tell you all the reasons why, and they're not excuses. There's, people say, oh, you make excuses for Sonny Liston. If you look up the definition of the word reason and excuse, reason is something you do, is something you give to explain why something happened. An excuse is something you do to justify what happened. The reason I told you the reasons why Sonny lost those 2 fights, with Ali. And so was he more talented than Ali? Yeah. I mean, in 15 rounds, Sonny could have gone 15 rounds. He never had to. He won 12 rounds once with Eddie Machen. But at some point, he would have caught Ali with a left hook, and that would have been the end of it. Ali knew that. Nobody would train Muhammad Ali like he fought. No one, not Archie Moore, not Eddie Futch. They said so. You don't pull back. You're leaving yourself open. Plus, he got caught by Sonny Banks. He got caught by Henry Cooper, who were small fighters. Well, Henry was a lot smaller. Sonny hits him with a left hook, and that's the end of it. So they're great fighters. But like I say, they're head and shoulders above all the other heavyweights. And the tragic thing is we never got to see them at their very best. We saw Sonny in 1960, but if he had fought Floyd Patterson in 61, as he should have, that third Johansson fight should have never taken place. I don't know how it got sanctioned. Then Sonny would have gone to Europe. He would have fought, anybody who would have fought him. He had cleaned out the heavyweight division, and so yeah, I can't. I would thank him no less than number 2.
Yeah, Liston, as you said, he missed his peak because of his age. He wasn't, and then Ali was banned during his peak. So yeah, similarities there. So I'm quite intrigued to hear your top 5 heavyweights of all time. Then, so who do you have numbers 1 to 5? Then heavyweights best ever.
It's difficult to round out for me to pick 3, 4, and 5. I think the top 10 heavyweights of all time were all African American. I could see putting George and Lennox Lewis and I don't know, the number 5.
Larry Holmes.
I don't think so. I mean, Larry Holmes was a good fighter. He would not have beaten George Foreman. George, in a 15-round fight, Larry Holmes didn't hit hard enough to knock out a lot of guys. I mean, he went 15 rounds with Ken Norton. 15 tough rounds. He never hurt Norton, much less knocked him down. So, I mean, Riddick Bowe was a hell of a fighter. Evander Holyfield was a hell of a fighter. If Mike Tyson had taken the sport seriously and not gone off and did what he did, maybe he's in the top 5. I don't think Joe Louis would have, against some of these bigger, later fighters, I don't know that he would have been any match for them. I love Joe Louis. What Joe Louis did, the single most important fight that ever took place was when he beat Max Schmeling in 1938 to prevent the title from going to Hitler in Nazi Germany. It would have been 7 years before we ever saw that title. and it destroyed the myth of the Aryan race. You know, and what's a real shame about Joe Louis is the way the government treated him.
Yeah.
Joe Louis, he fought a fight as a benefit, but instead of having the proceeds that would have gone to him go directly to the charity, they wrote him a check. He signed over the check, which means he had to pay taxes on it. And they hounded him for the rest of his life, the IRS. That's why he fought Marciano. He came back to fight. Exactly. So that's really tragic. A hell of a guy. You know, a hell of a guy who aged really badly. You know, when he fought Marciano, he looked like an old man. He looked like a real old man.
Yeah, I suppose back in those days, compare them to today, fighters have longer peaks. Back then, I mean, if you're in your early 30s, you're considered way past your prime. Now, in your early 30s, you're still in your prime.
Yeah, I remember Ash Resnick told me, he says, damn, Sonny Liston, he never had a prime. I asked him, when was Sonny's prime? He didn't have a prime. He said, your prime is usually 23 to 27 or 28. And back then, that was the case. You get to be 30, you're kind of an old man. They didn't train like they do nowadays, you know, and they fought a lot more often than they do nowadays. You can round out the top 5 any way you want. It's really difficult. I just think that Ali and Liston are head and shoulders. Yeah, I interviewed a lot of people, a lot of boxers, a lot of trainers. I interviewed Jimmy Jacobs, who's the great fight manager of Mike Tyson, a world handball champion. He's the guy who had the collection of fight films. Yeah. And everybody I would talk to, whether it be Patterson, Eddie Futch, Johnny Toko, I said, you know, at Sonny's best, who do you think could beat Sonny Liston? I probably asked this question 12 times, and I get 2 different responses. Either people like Patterson said, that's a good question, or they didn't answer the question at all. And these are boxing. So like I say, you know, I have opinions. Opinions aren't worth anything unless you can back them up. You know, there's 2 kinds of opinions, uninformed opinions and informed opinions. I like to think that I have an informed opinion about Sonny when it comes to his ranking. People want to disagree, that's fine. But, you know, if you want to know who Sonny Liston was in and out of the ring, you got to read my book. Because nobody did the job that I did. I just republished my book, a 2nd edition. It's a lot better than the 1st edition. There's really nothing more I can say about Sonny. Can I show it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we'll get the link for that as well. Have you sent me the link in email for that version? Yeah. Okay. Good. I'll put that in all the videos I upload for this one. So, Liston's personality. Do you believe he was really misunderstood? Was he intentionally playing the villain? What sort of sides? You mentioned about the children. He loved children. What else about his personality which people sort of do not know about Liston?
He intentionally. He wanted to appear mean. He wanted to scare the shit out of fighters. I mean, people got in the ring and they were shaking. I think one writer said he could see the sweat pouring down the back of Floyd Patterson's knee. You know, he already had a disguise that he was going to use. He knew he was going to lose. He fought a stupid fight. You can't trade punches with Sonny Liston. But outside of the ring, if you treated him well, if he's around friends and people he liked, he was a good guy. He would do anything for you. He had a terrible drinking problem. He was a severe alcoholic. But he could stop drinking before a fight. And when he was with some of his friends, especially his white friends like Davy Pearl, Lem Banker, Ash Resnick, they'd go out to dinner, at clubs and at restaurants in Vegas and elsewhere. Sonny never touched a drop of alcohol. But when he was around his friends, he would drink. Who was it? The guy who ran the IBC, the International Boxing Club, Truman Gibson. He didn't really like Sonny. And he said, sometimes when he would drink the whole bottle. He had a serious alcohol problem, which most people don't know about. And so, it's no wonder he showed his, right after that Ali fight, he showed his age. He looked like a very old man. In fact, when he went to Europe and Sweden to fight in 1966, there's a picture of him with Ingemar Johansson standing on a bridge, and Sonny's got this overcoat on, and he's obviously overweight. And you look at his face, and it's the face of a very old man, very old man. So no, he was misunderstood. He was never given a chance. He was never given a second chance, which everyone gets. When he stepped off the plane in Philadelphia after the Patterson fight, I think it was like 2 days later, and he had prepared a speech on the plane, and he gets off the plane and he says to Geraldine, "There's nobody here." There were like 50 people. He had lived in Philadelphia for 4.5 years before he fought Floyd Patterson and beat him for the heavyweight title. He brought the heavyweight title back to Philadelphia. They were saying, "We don't want you here." Yeah. St. Louis, "We don't want you here." Chicago, "We don't want you here." He moved to Chicago after Philadelphia, because after that reception, Bill Reddish, he called Bill Reddish that night. They didn't talk about boxing. They talked the entire night. Sonny was really upset. He was down. They talked the whole night. He said, Bill, probably like 6 o'clock, he said, "I got to go home, Sonny. I got to get ready for work." So he had made up his mind to leave, to move to Chicago, where he had relatives, and they had treated him well there. Yeah, they moved on the south side of Chicago, close to where Barack Obama has a home now. Okay. He comes out at lunchtime to sign autographs, take photos with kids, and 4 police cars drive up, 4 different directions, and they sit there, 2 cops in each car. They sit there for 10 minutes and drive off. He had written at Mayor Daley, says, "I'd like to work on a project with you to help kids, to help disadvantaged youth." Never got a response. He stayed there 6 months. Chicago said, "We don't want you here." He goes to Denver. He's followed everywhere. What do they say? What are they saying to him? "We don't want you here." He was never given a second chance. That's all he wanted.
Yeah, it's such a shame, because Philadelphia was such a great boxing city. But I heard Liston, I think he said something along the lines of, "I'd rather be a lamppost in Denver than the mayor of Philadelphia." Because as exactly. You said, he wasn't being treated. A heavyweight champion of the world isn't perhaps the most prestigious achievement in the sports. It
used to be.
Most famous faces in sporting history are Lee Tyson, both from heavyweight champions, and Liston reached that pinnacle as well. But yeah, he just didn't get the respect. Yeah.
It used to be, a heavyweight fight, man, you would get like palpitations, there would be such excitement for a heavyweight title fight. I remember feeling it. Everybody would feel it. And now, I don't know, not so much. I don't know.
I agree with you. It's not the same. I grew up in the 80s when Tyson was there, and saw the Bo Holyfield sort of trilogy as well. Yeah, there was a certain different feel to it, wasn't it, back then?
Yeah.
So what about? So much mystery about Sonny Liston's life, his age, the Ali fights, but then the way his life ends is also shrouded in mystery. So what can you tell us about Sonny Liston's death?
I can tell you exactly what happened. Okay. Just before Christmas, Geraldine flies home with their adopted son, Danielle, to St. Louis for the holidays. Their marriage was on the rocks at that point. Sonny wasn't coming home all that much. He's coming home at late hours. He was probably doing a lot of shady things. And so she would call him every day, wished him Merry Christmas. He called St. Louis. She talked to him until about the 28th. On the 28th, late in the 28th, he calls his sparring partner, Gary Bates. I had the privilege of talking to Gary Bates in Las Vegas. He passed away in 2014. And they were really good friends. And he said, "Look, I just got back from LA. He was meeting with his agent. He had a fairly promising acting career at that point. He was all set to fight George Savallo. he needed to do something to make money. So Gary Bates brings a cocktail waitress, as they told me, from Circus. He goes up to Sonny's house. I believe it was late on the 28th or it was on the early on the 29th. Knocks on the door and there's no answer. So he doesn't know what to think of it. And then he read about what happened. But Mildred Stevenson was the housekeeper for both Sonny Liston and Lem, and she had a key to both houses. And she went over to Sonny's house on New Year's Eve day, opened the door, saw the living room was a mess. There had been evidently an epic struggle. And Sonny Liston, she saw Sonny Liston with a needle in his arm, obviously dead. She calls Lem Banker, tells him what she saw. Lem says, just get out of there, lock the door. Lem didn't call anybody, which is a little surprising. They were very close. Geraldine has not heard from Sonny for like 3 days. Johnny Tocco, the trainer who had his own gym in Las Vegas, a few days before New Year's, invites Sonny to his gym for a New Year's Eve celebration. Sonny says, I'll be there. Come midnight, Sonny's not there. So Johnny calls his house, no answer. 2 o'clock, Johnny calls his house, no answer. He can't figure it. Sonny said something, he would do something, he would do it. That morning, Geraldine calls Johnny Tocco, says, I'm really worried. I haven't heard from Sonny in a few days. Can you go over to the house? I don't know what happened. He goes over to the house, the door's locked, he can't get in. He sees Sonny's car in the driveway. He calls somebody at either the sheriff's department or police department who he knows. He says, we got to get in the house here. I'm worried here. They open the house. He sees, and the cops that were there sees the same thing that Mildred Stevenson saw. Sonny has a fucking needle in his arm. Sonny was not a drug addict. He may have done some drugs. I know he did cocaine. He smoked marijuana. I didn't really look into that aspect of his life. A lot of people are more interested in his death than they are in his life. And that's a tragedy in itself. Johnny Tocco is upset. They were very close. They knew each other in St. Louis when Sonny fought in St. Louis. Johnny Tocco leaves. Okay, this is on New Year's Day. Geraldine gets home on January 5th, the evening of January 5th. She goes into the house, lights are on, the smell is atrocious. She's with Danielle. She walks upstairs. The house is immaculate, by the way, at that point. She walks upstairs, sees Sonny on this bench which is at the foot of the bed, no needle in his arm, and he's been dead for a week. His body is decomposing badly. She takes Danielle to a neighbor's house. She maintains her composure. She calls her attorney. She says, there's nothing she could do. She doesn't call the police right away, which some people think, why didn't she call the police right away? Even the cop I talked to, really nice guy, Dennis Caputo, who had no axe to grind with Sonny. He said, yeah, that was a little suspicious. Plus there were holes in the backyard where somebody had been digging. Well, a good young friend of Sonny's at the time, I talked to later, he says, they used to keep money buried in the backyard, which a lot of people did, I guess. She also called the doctor. And after 2.5 hours, she calls the police. People wondering, why did you wait so long? Well, she knew the house was going to be descended upon by press and by cops. So she did whatever she could to protect herself. All of her valuables or whatever, she wanted to get her affairs in order. So the question was, how did Sonny Liston die? Who killed him? He did not inject that on his own. A man whose name escapes me, in 2015, I think, wrote a book about his father, who at one point, he was a mobster. He was on the FBI's most wanted list when he got arrested driving down Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles in his Cadillac convertible. He was on the top 10 most wanted list. Served time. He was estranged from his son. Just before he died, they got together And he said, I got to tell you, I was there. I was part of the crew that was there when we killed Sonny Liston. And the guy wrote about it. Okay. I didn't know that when I published my first edition. And so, okay, the mob killed him. I figured the mob killed him. So the question is, why? A drug deal gone bad? You know, was he trying to horn in on the drug territory in West Las Vegas, which is a really rough part of town? Well, there are a lot of people in New Jersey who will tell you for a fact that Sonny Liston was killed in retribution for not throwing his final fight against Chuck Wepner. Because, you know, Sonny was done already. And Chuck Wepner was a journeyman his whole career, but he was in line for a big Madison Square Garden fight. Johnny Tocco was in a coffee shop with Sonny when a couple of mobsters motioned him over. Sonny was gone for like 3 hours. And he said, what's going on, Sonny? Relax, I'm gonna knock this guy out. You know, because he knew they were mobsters, so they want you to fix the fight. Don't worry about it. Sonny's not gonna throw a fight for money. They offered him $7,000. He got $13,000 for his last fight. 6 years removed from being the heavyweight champ of the world. He was paid $13,000 to fight Chuck Wepner. So they offered him another $7. Yeah, Sonny, it's 20 grand, it's easy money. Just, you know, make it look good. But you got to lose this fight, Sonny. We take it as a personal favor. Sonny bludgeons Wepner. Okay, so Sonny's in his dressing room. There's a woman there waiting for him. He gets out of the shower, and I think the guy's name is Don DiGilio, and 3 of his henchmen, big mob guys, are waiting for him in his dressing room. DiGilio throws an envelope, $7,000 at his chest, falls to the floor. He says, N-word, the next time we see you, you're a dead man. They leave. Sonny is so scared, he leaves his cup and his boots behind. He leaves home with his clothes in his hand in his robe. Okay. 6 months later, somebody had to betray him. Maybe it was one of the 2 hookers that Sonny was with that day. Gary Bates told me that he ran into a guy, and we tried to find him at a construction site. And the guy noticed Gary Bates, who was a journeyman heavyweight. He lost to Cooney, he lost to Ken Norton. He lost to a lot of people. He had like a 14-14 record. And the guy saw his boxing gear on the front seat. He says, yeah, I used to spar with Sonny Liston. He said, well, you know, I delivered heroin to Sonny's house for the 2 hookers he was with, the 2 junkies he was with the day before he died. And so I have a feeling that one of them betrayed Sonny, maybe left the front door unlocked, because there was an epic struggle. Sonny fought for his life, and he finally got subdued, and they injected him with an overdose, you know, a hot dose that killed him. Johnny Tocco said probably injected him enough heroin to kill a horse. So he's there for like 5 days before his wife gets home. The sheriff at the time was a real tough guy. His name escapes me right now. He must have called the mob. And, you know, even the mob was afraid of the sheriff. And they said, look, you left the place. The way the house looks now, because the cops told him, you know, the house is a mess. You know, I don't want an investigation here. Clean up the fucking house. You know, you kill them, fine. Who the hell cares? So yeah, Geraldine comes home. There's no sign of a struggle. There's no sign of anything except Sonny on the bench with a decomposing body, which as the coroner was carrying it out, his body was so decomposed, it almost split. I hate to say this, as disgusting as it is, it almost split as they were putting him into a body bag. He was so heavy, they dropped him like 3 or 4 times on the way to the hearse or whatever they call it. So yeah, He did not kill himself. The mob killed him with a heroin overdose. And I'm 95% certain that it was because he didn't throw the Webner fight. Because my sources in New Jersey said it's a fact, right? So, and it was such an undignified way for him to go out. He was a very dignified man. You ever see pictures of him dressed? He could be like on the cover of GQ. He could have been a male model. He was a very good-looking guy with a smile that could light the room. He always dressed impeccably. And for him to go out like that, shit. Or as Sonny would say, shit. You know. Anyway, you know, I'm passionate about it. The guy was, you know, he deserves better. And I've taken it upon myself since 1978 to restore the man's reputation for what it was and to give him the legacy that he deserves. And the legacy he deserves is that he was a good man who did a lot of bad things, who had a dark side, tried to overcome it. You know, everybody lets everybody else off the hook. Sonny's the only great athlete whose reputation has actually gotten worse since he died. And it's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Yeah, I agree with you. So what about any remaining family of Sonny Liston? Is there any?
I don't know the extent of it. I was fortunate enough to serendipitously get to meet two of Sonny's nieces and one of his nephews, who was on his deathbed actually when I talked to him. But Helen Long, who was his sister Alcora's firstborn. Alcora gave birth to 14 children. And I also talked to Fannie Mae Hopkins, who's still alive. Helen Long passed away about a year ago. My interview with her was just great. She told me so much about Sonny. And I also was lucky to be able to befriend and meet William Wingate in Philadelphia. The only one of Sonny's 6 or 7 kids that I know of, I never talked to any of them, that he fathered, I think, much less adopted, that I was able to talk to. Bill was a tough guy. Bill looked like his father. He was a big guy, a sweet guy. Bill represented, I was asked if I knew any of his family because when they inducted Sonny into the Las Vegas Hall of Fame, people who knew that I knew a lot about Sonny connected me with the guy who was organizing and said, do you know of any relatives? And so I arranged for Bill to fly out to Las Vegas. I introduced him, which was one of the proudest moments of my life. And he accepted the award on his father's behalf. He went out to the cemetery. I took him to the cemetery where Sonny was buried. And I was there with my friend Johnny Burrell, who's a photographer and a videographer. And he's got 5 to 10 minutes of video about Bill that is really something, which I hope somebody finally gets to see. And Bill, unfortunately, 3 years ago, he passed away of cancer. Evidently a fairly excruciating death, but he was a sweet guy, found God. He had been like the number 2 gang member in Philadelphia when he was growing up, but everybody loved him, Bill Wingate. And so other than that, I don't know. I imagine Danielle is still around, and there are some of his nieces or nephews that are probably still around, and great nephews. But the only one, like I said, the only one actually that now I know I can talk to is Fannie Mae Hopkins. A very sweet woman. They loved their Uncle Sonny. He took care of his sister Alcora's kids, bought them a van. So yeah, I don't know.
Fascinating stuff. So it's got a couple of questions from the guys on Instagram. So one of them, Jack 100, he wants to know, how do you believe Sonny Liston would fare with today's heavyweights?
He'd knock them all out early. I don't want to say anything really derogatory about any of these fighters. I just watched the other day with Archie Moore's daughter. We watched the first Fury Wilder fight. I didn't see a lot of boxing ability there. I really didn't. I mean, the guy Fury is big. He got 6'8", 6'9". Wilder, I didn't think had much ability. He obviously can hit like a mule, but if Sonny hit Fury in the body, that would be it. That's not a boxer's body. More power to him. Heavyweight champ of the world, can't begrudge him that. But like I say, I don't see. The only chance any fighter would have against Sonny in a 15-round fight, even a 12-round fight, is to outbox. You couldn't outpunch the man. You couldn't. You couldn't let yourself be hit. So I don't follow boxing anymore. I'm a historian. Occasionally I'll watch some fight films of some of the great fighters. But I don't really care for the sport. It's a brutal sport. I have respect for Jack Johnson, all the great fighters who have come before, and I'll watch their fights, but I would never pay to see a fight. I don't know that I would go to see a fight live. I just have no interest. I really don't,
So as a boxing historian, who do you rank the greatest fighters of all time? We always hear Sugar Ray Robinson, Henry Armstrong. Who's your top 5 greatest of all time?
Well, I think those two are probably up there. I mean, pound for pound, both of those guys got to be in the conversation. I think Archie Moore is in the conversation for Definitely. Pound for pound. I mean, what a lot of people don't realize about Archie is that he fought a lot of heavyweights. Yeah. In trying to establish himself as a contender for Marciano. He was number 1 contender, heavyweight contender when he fought Marciano. He beat pretty handily on Nino Valdez. He beat him twice. Yeah. He beat Bob Baker, who was an up-and-coming guy. He beat a lot of good heavyweights. He was born in 1916. So when he fought Marciano, he's about 39 years old. When he won the title against Joey Maxim, he had already had like 160 fights. Yeah. The guy knocked out 100. Yeah, he knocked out 145 people. So who do great fighters? I only feel real comfortable in terms of ranking like heavyweights and light heavyweights. Although, yeah, Sugar Ray Robinson was spectacular. Henry Armstrong, he won the featherweight title, the welterweight title, and the lightweight title in the same year. Hello. So pound for pound, yeah, these guys are hell of fighters. I would say.
Light heavyweights you mentioned, Ezra Charles, Archie Moore, those sort of stand out.
Yeah, Ezra Charles was a truly great fighter. He's the one fighter that, there was 2 fighters that Archie Moore had trouble with. Ezra Charles. Charlie Burley. Yeah, Charlie. I mean, Charlie Burley deserves props. Eddie Futch, I had heard when I had an interview with Eddie Futch, he's going to ask you who you think was the best fighter of all time. And he says, you better answer Charlie Burley. Otherwise, he might not talk to you. And I can see why. The things that Archie has said about Charlie Burley are truly remarkable. I don't know, maybe Charlie Burley was one of the greatest pound for pound. It's just so hard for me. Heavyweights are easier to rank because of the weight differences. You had some heavyweights 185 pounds against a guy 230, with a long reach. I don't think they can fare too well. But at 147, 160, those are competitive, really competitive. And Marvin Hagler, great at 160. Yeah. I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard, look what he did as a welterweight. Oh, I'm sorry, I omitted Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran, I would put in my top 5, especially pound for pound. Look what he did. Yeah. He won the lightweight title. He won the welterweight title. And then he almost beat, he was so competitive. Yeah. So, yeah, you got Robinson, you got Duran, you got Armstrong. I mean, you can put Ali in there too. Look at that. He fought a lot of great fighters. And he fought Frazier at his best. He fought Foreman at his best. But, you know, the thing that people got to realize about Muhammad Ali is that he only fought as hard as he had to. You know, he was always thinking. And he beat Liston and Foreman. He won those fights outside of the ring by getting inside their heads. And more power to him. I will not, you know, I can't say anything bad about Muhammad Ali. I love the guy. I still do. But, you know, what people need to understand is that Liston and Ali, they're 1-2. I truly believe if they fought 4 times at their best, Liston wins 3, knocks them out twice, and they each win a decision. And, you know, people are they're going to go, well, if he hadn't said that, his interview would have been okay, but he's obviously delusional. And
I think the profile I have on Instagram, there's a lot of guys who like the old school, and Sonny Liston's name is getting mentioned more and more as being amongst the greatest. So there is that sort of change now in trend where people are beginning to recognize, like you mentioned, Charlie Burley. You know, 10 years ago, very few people actually heard of Charlie Burley or the Black Murderers, Row Fighters. Same for Ezra Charles. People didn't really give him his props until the last 10, 15 years. And I think same Liston, a lot of the guys who are actually looking into boxing now, they're more and more saying Liston was amongst the greats. And you know, the way you've spoken today, rightly so. So it's been eye-opening. It's been really enjoyable. Another user asked, his name's A3 Fur, Arthur, I'm guessing. He asks, what about Liston to you is underrated?
His boxing ability. He was a great boxer. Ali called him one of the most scientific boxers of all time. A lot of guys who know boxing have written about it. He could do everything well. It's not only, you know, when you talk about punchers, okay, yeah, Ernie Shaver's a hell of a right hand. Was he that the hardest punch ever? Maybe. I don't know. I was never hit by him. But Sonny could hit hard with all 4 punches. And he fought smart. He always fought his fight. He had tremendous boxing ability. He was a good defensive fighter. You know, if he got in trouble, you know, like against Cleveland Williams, he protected himself. So that's what most people don't realize. And guys like Ray Arcel and some of the trainers, they say he was an excellent boxer. And like I say, Ali himself said he was the most scientific boxers of all time. It's just one thing a lot of people don't realize. I remember watching the Today Show in, I think it was 1999 or 2000. I was fortunate enough to be watching, and Muhammad Ali was on. And he was speaking very softly. You know, he was obviously suffering from Parkinson's. There's nothing wrong with his mind. So near the end of the interview, Matt Lauer says, well, Muhammad, what do you consider to be your greatest accomplishment in life, in or out of the ring? Fully expecting Ali to say something. Well, I brought the world together, world peace. And Ali, without hesitating, says, beating Sonny Liston. And Matt Lauer is so shocked, he apologized. He said, well, I want to make sure I asked the question the right way. So what do you consider to be your greatest accomplishment in or out? He emphasizes the out of the ring part. And again, without hesitating, Ali goes, beating Sonny Liston. Okay. Ali was pissed at Sonny Liston for many years because he never got the opportunity to fight Sonny Liston at his best. And he knew it. But even then, remember when he's jumping around in the ring in Miami after Liston doesn't come out for the 7th round. I just beat Sonny Liston. I must be the greatest. You know, it was all talk before that. But here's what I will say, and because especially his reputation, Sonny's reputation is based on the Ali fights, is Muhammad Ali never fought the real Sonny Liston any more than Larry Holmes fought the real Muhammad Ali, or Rocky Marciano fought the real Joe Louis, and go back further, or Jess Willard fought the real Jack Johnson. Okay? All of those other guys, except for Liston, have gotten a free pass. Ali's last 2 fights were humiliating. I mean, you probably know the reasons why he looked so terrible against Larry Holmes. He didn't even throw a punch. Okay, those are humiliating losses. Trevor Berbick. People don't evaluate Muhammad Ali's career or the fact that he lost to a guy in his 8th professional fight. No, and they shouldn't. But in those fights, Ali was younger than Sonny Liston was when Sonny fought a young Cassius Clay and when he fought Ali in 65. So,
puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, they keep kicking him while he's down. The national publications are the worst offenders. There are a number of Time magazine articles there were 4 articles from after the first Ali fight and after the second fight. And Time magazine, national publication, mentions Liston's name, Liston, like 30 times. And 16 times, they spell Sonny's last name as Listen. I'm sorry, did they not have proofreaders? That was fucking intentional, all right? They just, the New York Times, they editorialized in 1962 when Patterson agreed to fight Sonny Liston, and the boxing commission would not sanction the fight for the same old reasons. He's a mob guy, an ex-con. New York Times called for the abolition of professional boxing in 1962. After the Lewiston fight, I mean, they wrote Sonny off. So in 2000, there's a 35th anniversary article not in the sports section, in like a feature section. And they don't command enough respect to have one of their writers, one of their staff to write and the article. They hire somebody. In the first line, the New York Times article on the 35th anniversary of the Lewiston fight, to paraphrase, they basically say anybody who thinks that Sonny Liston didn't get knocked down or that fight was fixed is basically fostering a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy theory. And let me tell you something, the New York Times will own up to this at some point. I will take them to task. What the New York Times doesn't realize, and let me just say, I'm not beating up the New York Times. I read 2 newspapers. I read the New York Times and I read the Washington Post. What the New York Times has never failed to realize, and I really have a problem with the management, not with the writers, great newspaper. The New York Times has never realized that Sonny Liston is to heavyweight boxing what the New York Times is to the history of print journalism. By that, I mean, if each of them are not at the top of their respective mountains, they're this close, okay? And they got to apologize. They have to apologize for the treatment. They did a 50th anniversary article. Again, they hire somebody to write it, of the Lewiston fight. And it's like Sonny didn't exist. It was all about Ali. And it was just as disparaging as you can get. So I'm like, there are a lot of people who like Sonny Liston and know what a great fighter is. But it's like, I'm the lone guy out in the wilderness saying, hello, can I get your attention here? And so, I'm making a concerted effort now to get people's attention. And thanks to you, I mean, this will help out.
Yeah, I mean, that's all the questions I've had, but more thanks to you. It's been eye-opening. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I've loved every minute of listening to you speak about Sonny Liston. It's been really, really good. Really, so much I've learned from this as well. I mean, I thought I knew a fair bit about Liston, but you've taught me so much more in this interview. It's been great. I'm looking forward to getting this up on YouTube and then making some clips of this for Instagram and our social media platforms as well. And hopefully, we'll get some more on Sonny Liston, so people start recognizing him, how good he really was, and understanding more about the man behind the fighter and the man who more than just the Ali fights.
Exactly.
So
in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to sign an option with somebody who wants to do what they call a limited series about Sonny's life. What I most want to do is do a movie about Lewiston, and I definitely want to do a documentary about Lewiston, because, you know, the backdrops for that fight, which most people don't remember, is that leading up to the fight, Malcolm X got assassinated, which most people believed was by Elijah Muhammad's people, who had a disagreement with Malcolm X. Ali was very close with Malcolm X until there was the dispute. He said Ali sided with Elijah Muhammad. And leading up to the fight, the tension was palpable, because people were, it was rumored, serious rumors, that followers of Malcolm X, as retribution, were going to assassinate Muhammad Ali. And Ali had so much police protection around him at all times. That was the backdrop for that fight. And just to put the exclamation point on that photo of Sonny lying on the canvas, just before the fight, I forget the sports writer was talking to Sonny. He said, "What's there for me to worry about?" You know, when he was told about the assassination rumors. And then the next guy, the guy talked to him, he says, "They're coming for him, not me," right? So when Sonny is, you know, does the Jack Johnson when he's on his back and Ali's standing over him, I know Sonny's thinking, if you want him, take your shot. I ain't getting killed over this fucking fight, okay? And you look, I mean, Sonny's looking up at him. Well, you're a crazy man. You Muslims are crazy. I don't want any part of this. I just want to get out of here alive with my family. And which is what makes that whole Lewiston fight so compelling. So
I'd love to see you be involved in making a documentary or a movie about Liston. That would be really fascinating. Let's hope that comes off. Okay, so yeah, so thanks again. Thanks so much, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure again speaking to you. Really enjoyed it, and I'm sure a lot of the guys on Instagram and social media platforms got to enjoy listening to the interview as well.
I hope so. I thank you. I mean, this has been a real pleasure. I love talking about the man. And
pleasure's been all mine, Paul. Pleasure's been all mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, all the best. Take care. We'll keep in touch, I'm sure. And once again, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Take care, Paul.
You too.